Good day, everyone. Welcome to my project. In today's project, I'm going to be talking about an end-to-end data engineering project using Microsoft Fabrics. So, Microsoft Fabrics, it's a recently launched tool, and yeah, it's been trending, and people have been talking about it, and it's actually been believed that in the future there won't be any Azure data engineering projects without the use of Microsoft Fabrics. So yeah, stick with me. Let me talk about my project. And this is how the project is going to go. This is an end-to-end project, first of all. And of course, I'm going to be using Microsoft Fabrics. So in this project, we are going to be utilizing the Bing News Data Analytics platform. So first of all, what's Bing? So Bing is very similar to Google. It's a Microsoft search engine, unlike Google. Yeah, so that's what it is. We're going to be utilizing Bing. Yeah, so while doing the project, the goal will be to utilize the Bing news, to get the latest news from Bing and ingest it into Microsoft Fabrics and eventually create a report out of it. So again, most importantly, we're going to be implementing this end-to-end data engineering project through utilizing the Microsoft Fabrics platform. So yeah, one other important thing to note is that we're going to be ingesting this data, into Fabrics. And I said we're going to be getting our data from the Bing search. So that's going to be our data source for the project. So in Azure, we actually have something called the Bing API. And the Bing API can be used as a data source for data ingestion into multiple platforms. For extra context about the Bing API, the Bing API is a search API that enables safe, ad-free, location-aware search results. And how is it going to help us? It's going to be helpful to us. We're going to be looking at things or looking for things. And the thing I'm talking about is the latest news from the internet. And it's going to help us by utilizing Bing's ability to scour through or to comb through billions of web pages, images, and videos easily with the use of a single API call. So what's the architecture of this project looking like? Well, that's easy. We're going to create and configure all we need in regards to how we're going to work with the Bing API and how it's going to help us in our project. I'm going to configure all this within the Azure workspace. The workspace, I mean the Azure platform. Then the rest of the steps we're going to utilize or we're going to do is going to be on the Microsoft Fabrics platform entirely. So at one end, we're configuring how we're going to utilize this Bing API on the Microsoft Azure, on Microsoft Azure. Then we're going to move to the Fabrics platform and we're going to be doing our end-to-end data engineering project there. All right. So in this project, of course, our first step, like when we are on the Microsoft Fabrics platform, of course, is going to be an important step in all data engineering projects, which is data ingestion. So how are we going to do this data injection on the Fabrics platform? That's easy. We're going to be utilizing what we call the data factory. We're utilizing what do I call it? The data factory. And one key thing to note that this is not a data factory in Azure. This is the data factory present in Microsoft Fabrics. So we're going to be using the data factory on Fabrics platform to connect to the Bing API. Then all the data we get from the Bing API are going to be ingested and going to be stored in the JSON format. So we're going to be getting the raw data as a JSON file and the data as a part of the data engineering step. So the question now is, where is this JSON file going to be stored? The JSON file is going to be stored in OneLake. OneLake is your one-stop solution for data storage in Fabrics. So the interesting thing about OneLake is that everything, no matter what kind of database you are creating, whether it's a warehouse, a data warehouse, whether it's a lake house, whether it's a Kutsu database, yeah, you can create all of these and they have their own properties. But the underlying structure of Microsoft Fabrics is that they are all stored in a central OneLake. So specifically, if I'm to be specific, we are going to be storing this JSON file in a lakehouse database on top of OneLake. So OneLake is the base, but the JSON is going to be stored in the lakehouse. Once the JSON data is stored in the lakehouse or in the lakehouse database, we are going to be processing this JSON data. We're going to be giving it a proper structure. By proper structure, a table structure, we're going to give it the predefined schema. So this table we're going to be converting a JSON to is going to be saved as a delta format. I said delta format. I meant the data delta table, a delta table. And how are we going to do this process? The process where this JSON file is going to be converted to a proper delta table, and like how are we going to what's going to make this possible? What's going to make this possible is something we call the Synapse Data Engineering. So the Synapse Data Engineering tool is part of Microsoft Fabrics. So using this tool, we'll be creating Spark notebooks for transforming the raw JSON file to a clean delta table. And this delta table will be stored in a lake database as well. So what's the difference between these two steps if you notice? The first step is we have the raw file structure, the JSON file, and now the next after using the Synapse Data Engineering tool, we have been able to convert it to a delta table still stored in the lakehouse. So we're getting to a very interesting part of this project, a very, very interesting part of this project. So at the end of this step I'm talking about, or at the end of what we want to do right now, we'll be having the clean data stored in the lakehouse database. As a data engineer, one very important thing you have to be doing is processing raw data into a very curated form. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We'll be talking about how we're going to achieve that using the Fabrics platform. And this clean data or this proper data now, this created form of data can be accessed by anyone. It can be accessed by the data scientist to do some machine learning work. It can be accessed by the data analyst to build reports. Very interesting. I think this is why Microsoft Fabrics is very important. And what am I talking about? Is that Microsoft Fabrics, different teams or different members of teams can collaborate. What am I talking about? You can I can have workspaces available for the data engineer, for the data scientist, for the data analyst, all on the Microsoft Fabric platforms. So they have different set of tools to achieve their goal, to achieve result, to achieve the work, and everything is all in one circle. The collaboration is very effective and awesome. So in this our end-to-end data engineering project, we are going to be doing some data science work, we're going to be doing some data engineer work, and we're going to be doing some data analyst work. Very interesting. So at this stage of our work, we have clean data ready, just as a reminder to be used by the data scientist or the data analyst. So at this stage is where the data science part of this project comes in. We are going to be taking the clean data from the Lakehouse database and we're going to be performing a sentimental analysis using a text analytics machine learning model. So the question is, what do I mean by sentimental analysis? And I'll explain that right now. Remember, the data we're getting from the Bing News API is news data. So each set of news has its own description. So with this description, we want to predict whether the news is going to be positive news, going to be a negative news, going to be a neutral kind of news or kind of information. So once we're able to kind of predict the sentiment of the news, the data from that we get from there is going to be data is going to be stored as a delta table also. And how are we going to do this in the Microsoft Fabrics platform? That's kind of easy. We're going to be using something called the Synapse Data Science tool. The Synapse Data Science tool. So in this step, we're going to use a pre-trained text analytics model to help us predict the sentiment of the news. Is it negative? Is it positive? Is it neutral? What's going on? And yes, the delta table with the sentiment prediction with the result of using our Synapse Data Science tool is also going to be stored in our Lakehouse database. So at this point in time of our project, we have a more refined data or more we have more refined data which will be very suitable for creating reports. So this is where we start thinking of or start planning report creation because why we have the data available in the format we want. We have the positive, negative, or neutral sentiments, and we can get a report out of this. And yes, these two previous steps we've been able to do. We have been able to use the Synapse Data Engineering. We have been able to use the Synapse Data Science tool. So that's the data engineer plus the data science. So what next? The data analyst part. Or here's the part we get to analyze the data we have been able to get, or we have been able to refine. So for this step, we are going to be utilizing the Power BI to create a report for us. You know, from the previous data loaded in the Lakehouse database into the Lakehouse, stored in Delta format. We're going to be getting this data. We're going to be creating a report out of it to see the distribution of things going on. So in Power BI, we create a basic dashboard which can be used as a news report to monitor the the daily news, the latest news for the day. So once we do that, we're going to be using a very new tool in Microsoft Fabrics, and at that point in time, or the tool's name actually is called the Data Activator. And the Data Activator is a very wonderful tool which is mainly used for the purpose of alerting. Say, for example, we are going to be creating a dashboard in Power BI that contains multiple visuals. So using the Data Activator, we can connect to Power BI and set up an alert. We'll connect the activator to the data in Power BI and set up an alert for any particular visual. So in our use case, if you remember, at the data science step of the project where we do use the model and things like that, we are able to get news whether the news is positive, negative, or neutral. So where does the data activator come in? The data activator can actually be used to set up an alert to tell us when, so like for example, if the news is negative, an alert can be set to that and it will, or you can say it can be triggered, an alert can be triggered. So it's a bit confusing, right? But basically what we can do is that we can set up and let, okay, if it's negative, let the data activator message us or tell us through our email or our Microsoft Teams that, oh, this is what's going on, a negative sentiment, a positive sentiment, etc, depending on how we set up our data activator, depending on how we, okay, what are the triggers, how we set the triggers to be. So the trigger can be either positive, negative, or neutral in our case. So yes, the data activator can alert us, oh, to our emails, to our Microsoft Teams, and etc. if any of the triggers, or if any of the, yeah, are met, or if any of the conditions that could trigger the data activator to work are met. So particularly in this project, we'll be configuring the alerts to our Microsoft Teams. So if anything happens, depending on how we set it, whether it's negative, positive, or neutral, we're going to be alerted on our Microsoft Teams. Very interesting project. So I hope you've been able to get a clear view of my project. So this project actually, if you look at it, is actually a 5-step process. And in the first step, if you remember, we're going to be using the data factory to connect to the Bing API and ingest all the latest news data. And where's that going to? That's going to the Lakehouse database as a JSON file format, just as a reminder. In the step 2, we are going to be using the Synapse Data Engineering tool to process this JSON file, and we're going to convert it or process it into a clean Delta table. And then in the step 3, we're going to be using the Synapse Data Science tool to predict the sentiment of the news data and transform it also to a better or a more refined Delta table. So in the step 3, we're actually going to be using the Synapse Data Science tool again to predict the sentiment of the news data. And after this, we're going to be loading it back to the Lakehouse database. So in step 4, we're going to be using Power BI to create a news dashboard using the latest data, So in the final step, which is the step 5, we are going to be making use of the data activator to configure alerts. Yeah, the data activator will configure alerts in the Power BI visual for us. Of course, these alerts are going to be going to the these alerts are going to be sent to our Microsoft Teams. So I think this project is an interesting one because we're going to be doing most of all of this. In fact, let's say all apart from the API part, We're going to be doing most of all of this within the Microsoft Fabrics platform. And I think it's an interesting project because you would see this project as we go, but we're going to be doing the work of the data analyst, the data scientist, and the data engineer, which we are. So yes, I'm deciding to work on this project with all of this in mind, and I do hope you have fun or you pick up interesting things or learn new things about Microsoft Fabric, just watching this video, or just learn about my experience on the platform and my journey to becoming a data engineer or a better data engineer professional. Thank you very much. Also, it seems I forgot to mention one thing, and that is orchestration, orchestration, orchestration. So we are actually going to be using Data Factory to create pipelines for orchestrating all the tasks that has been mentioned in this our um, data engineering end-to-end project architecture. So yes, the process is going to be orchestrated right from the data ingestion to the data loading to the data processing to the data science part and etc. It's going to be a very interesting project. Yes, so everything will be covered end to end via pipelines. There'll be pipelines. Everything will be moving in a smooth and a cool direction from one step to another, from step one to step two, all the way to step five, where we're configuring alerts to our Microsoft Teams. So actually, this project agenda, what does it entail? What's the full scope again? So the full scope of this project actually is from I'm going to be taking everybody. I'm going to be taking you through the beginning steps from my environment setup on Azure or Fabrics to the data ingestion step to the data transformation step, the sentimental analysis, we're going to be working with incremental load, the data reporting and the Microsoft Power BI, the build, how we're going to build pipelines end to end to make everything work, how we're going to set up alerts using the Data Activator, and finally, how we're going to perform end to end testing. So yeah, this is the agenda for this project, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much.